Welcome to the Model Farming God's Way Farm at Grassroof in Port Elizabeth in South Africa. My name is Grant Dryden and I've had the privilege of being able to extend Farming God's Way internationally for the past 17 years. South Africa is in a real crisis with a very weak economy that's been further weakened by the COVID-19 lockdowns. The official unemployment figures in South Africa are over 30% and it's only climbing. This is a very serious issue for the most marginalized of our people, and most sectors of society are cutting jobs. But there's only one sector that remains wide open, and that is agriculture. Throughout the years of extending Farming God's Way, we have seen astounding improvements in thousands of international cases where people have had their lives and their livelihoods transformed. For example, our lead Farming God's Way farmer, Dixon Shiwali, he went from his father's 3 bags on an acre right up to 69 bags on the same piece of ground over a 4-year period. More importantly, we have seen an incredible transformation in both individual farmers' lives as well as in village communities, where we've seen the yoke of poverty loosened, removed, and even broken off their lives. However, in the past 17 years of extension, thousands of people have been trained in South Africa, and yet the adoption levels are very, very low. It's important to understand the reasons for this in order for us to be able to make the necessary adjustments to the strategy and to be able to bring about successful adoption and change lives and livelihoods. Firstly, the South African rural tribes were historically pastoralists. They were not agrarian by nature. They were looking after cattle and goats and sheep, and as a result of that, they don't have growing food as a natural part of their historical culture. Secondly, there's been a massive influx of people from the rural areas moving into the cities to try and find work, and this urbanized sector of society is currently the most at risk. Thirdly, there's been a severe dependency syndrome that has been developed amongst the poor because of government grants and handouts, which has really crippled the poor and their desire to work, as well as their ability or confidence to be able to create viable businesses. Fourthly, what we've noticed is that even though we see our model farm as something that's very large and the trainees love it, they can't relate to this or implement it because they don't have the size of land that's readily available, certainly not in the towns anyway. Fifthly, there are so many obstacles for the poor to be able to overcome to start a garden. They don't know what or how much or even where to buy the necessary inputs. And even if they want to, they end up buying seeds and seedlings at exorbitant prices, which makes growing vegetables unviable for them. So during this lockdown period in May, I was praying in this garden and I said to the Lord, imagine if we had 100 gardens like this one in South Africa. I stopped and I corrected myself and said, Lord, no, 1,000 gardens. And then I paused again and I said to myself in my heart, Lord, what about 1,000,000 gardens like this? And as I began to comprehend what that might look like, something settled in my heart. But I realized that it is not attainable on large scale and we need to make some adjustments. To set your mind at ease right now, I just want to tell you that we are not asking you for anything, except that you get actively involved. We can do this, and we must do this, but it must be done in a different way. The issue is not whether Farming God's Way works or not. It has been demonstrated and there's a long-standing history of success across many nations, climates, and various crop types. The issue is how to get the poor to do this successfully. How do we break through all of the barriers that keep them from walking in the fullness of God's plan and His providence? To change from a pastoral to an agrarian culture, you first need to change the mindset to be able to believe that the land has been given by God so that we can profit from it. And to be able to do this, they must be successful in their very first attempts. The Bible says in Luke chapter 16 verse 10, he who is faithful in a little thing is also faithful in much. Being successful is a critical factor in this journey. And so we want the community to start small and be faithful with a little, that they may have success, which in turn will breed success. A senior man of God recently said to me the other day, he said, You know, the answer to the economic crisis in South Africa is that we must get the people to leave the urban sectors and go back to the land. I heartily agree, as it's the only viable remaining economic sector for the poor to be able to lean on. But they can't go back to the land and do what their forefathers did in the past, as they will soon be back in the towns, having failed to make a living out of the land. We have to learn from our mistakes. Farming God's way is a completely different way, revealing God's blueprint from when He first planted the garden in the east of Eden. And He put Adam into the garden He had made and told him, work it and take care of it. Farming God's way unlocks the potential of the land and shows us how to align our ways to His ways and walk in His favor and His blessings. Historically, many garden programs have started and then failed based on the major flaw that they too are perpetuating the dependency syndrome through handouts. However, as soon as the handouts stop, so do the garden programs. In the Gardens of Faithfulness programs, we are not going to give any handouts or hand-ups or cash loans. We are going to teach people how to grow nutritious vegetables using their own hands by utilizing the natural resources that God has already provided and they exist all around them. Trainees will have to clear their own garden, collect 1 shopping packet of manure, 5 shopping packets of grass or leaves for mulch, and 1 500ml margarine tub of wood ash. The very small size of the Gardens of Faithfulness, 1 meter wide by 2 meters long, is critical for getting adoption and for the principles to take root in people's lives. They are made up of 2 rows of green beans, 2 rows of spinach, 1 row of beetroot, and 1 row of spring onion. This is a very simplistic version of Farming God's Way, which anyone can do whilst providing excellent daily household dietary supplements. Out of the 1 meter by 2 meter garden, many of the fullness of the skills in Farming God's Way can be gleaned over time as the trainees engage in repeat trainings throughout the growing season. Those that are faithful will in turn be rewarded with the opportunity to be able to expand their gardens next season. And over time, we trust that the confidence gleaned on small scale will birth the realization that their families' currently idle hands have the potential to become the sources of their own food security and viable farm businesses in the future. To bridge the pricing gap between the small grower and the large-scale seedling suppliers, we are working to be able to establish a beneficial pricing strategy for our most marginal communities in our nation. We want to be able to make seed and seedling packs available for sale between 10 Rand and 15 Rand. This cost is less than a packet of chips, and yet the value of the Garden of Faithfulness crops is approximately 500 Rands worth, and supply each household with year-round fresh produce. To reach 1 million people in this country and bring a measure of food security to each of these households is an enormous task indeed. But it is doable if we each work through our own existing areas of influence. We currently have only 20 Farming God's Way accredited trainers in South Africa, which is not nearly enough to be able to reach the 5,000 to 10,000 organizations that are required to touch 1 million households in this nation. So Farming God's Way will be providing free online training videos and handouts that can be used by your organization's facilitators on the ground at your convenience. Over each season, implementers will be exposed to several Farming God's Way 2 to 3 hour training modules where the opportunity to disciple and bring the fullness of God's ways will be built through the repeat training opportunities. Get involved today by registering your organization for free online. Click on the link in the description below and fill out the Gardens of Faithfulness Memorandum of Understanding. This will give you access to the Gardens of Faithfulness program outlines, the online video series content, soft copies of the handouts, and we will also be endeavoring to secure beneficial rates for seeds and seedlings. This is a very exciting empowerment model, and has the potential of drawing many parts of the body of Christ together to fulfill the challenge of Isaiah 58, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, and to shelter the homeless, and not to hide ourselves from our own flesh and blood. In a way, though, that equips the poor to be able to help themselves and bridge the seemingly impossible chasms that separate them from being able to break out from under the yoke of oppression. They say that it only takes a spark to light a flame. But if we have many sparks across this nation, we can see a wildfire of God's glorious hope revealed to those most in need. We look forward to walking alongside you and your organization's successful rollout of the Gardens of Faithfulness program.